Pathetic. Frankly, that is the only word left for it. Today we have reached a point where an entire multi-billion-dollar industry got so comfortable selling people products, it could later remotely erase that a continental bureaucracy, the European Commission in Brussels, has to step in like a tired, overworked landlord, asking why the tenants have set fire to the hallway for the 10th time this month. Now here is the question that matters, the one this whole circus keeps trying to dodge with its fog machine PR language. When you click buy on a digital storefront, what exactly did you buy? Suppose a publisher waits 3 years, pulls a secret lever in a server room in California. That turns your $60 purchase into a gravestone that plays menu music. At that point, the word purchase has lost all meaning. Clearly that is the issue. Obviously, that is the hook. Basically, that is the whole rotten sandwich. Meanwhile, everything else is just garnish, designed to make the scam go down easier. Nobody should pretend this is some tiny nerd tantrum hiding in a dark corner of a basement forum. Likewise, this is not 5 guys with anime avatars screaming at a wall because their favorite racing game got a bit old. Instead, this story got dragged into the blinding light of the European legal process because more than 1 million people looked at the way modern publishers treat ownership and finally said no. You are not going to gaslight me into calling a disappearing product a normal sale anymore. Worse, here is the part that makes executives sweat through their little statements. This was not just a lot of online support. Officially, the European Citizens Initiative was formally submitted on January 26, 2026 with 1,300,000 verified statements of support, and it cleared the minimum threshold in 24 member states. That is not forum noise. Neither is that social media static. Rather, that is a real EU procedure with paperwork thresholds, legal review and consequences. Afterward, the European Parliament held the public hearing on April 16, 2026, and by April 19, the story had widened again. Now the whole thing had escaped the gaming bubble and entered the wider consumer rights conversation. Currently, the initiative is in the Commission examination phase, with the official response due by July 27, 2026. Publishers sold us a game. They took real money, currency that does not expire or delist itself from our bank accounts. Using store pages, cinematic trailers, gold editions, early access countdown clocks, and every psychological trick in the marketing playbook, they made that sale feel permanent. Naturally, they wanted us to feel like we were adding to a collection. Then the moment the support budget ended, or the concurrent player numbers dipped below a certain spreadsheet threshold, or the strategic pivot memo landed on a Thursday morning, suddenly that purchase started sounding like a temporary visitation right. This was supervised by a man in a blazer with bad intentions and a law degree. Exactly there is why the Stop Destroying Videogames campaign is the most dangerous thing to happen to a publisher's comfort zone in years. Anyone can understand the incident, which is exactly why corporate executives hate it. Suddenly, publishers had a clarity problem the second the argument became this clean. I paid for a game, and then the company killed it. Once that complaint sounds that normal, all the usual corporate excuses start sounding like a hostage note written by a PR firm. Next, let's look at the attitude of the industry, because that is where the real ugliness lies. Somehow the modern corporate version of game culture has become intentionally bland in the most insulting way possible. Every statement looks like it was designed by someone terrified of texture. You already know the style, soft wording, dead expressions, hollow empathy. First comes we appreciate our players. Then comes we remain committed to balancing innovation with community trust. Honestly, shut up, because that language is not neutral. Underneath, it is camouflage. In practice, it exists to flatten human outrage into manageable paperwork. Back then, the classic version of this industry, even when it was messy and greedy, at least had the nerve to sound like it was selling games to people who like games. Around that older model, there was energy. At least then, there was a sense that the audience was wanted. By contrast, the new version feels like it was built by talentless hacks who actively resent the loyal audience that kept the lights on for 30 years. Step by step, they smooth everything into a lecture, uglify every interface, and then act surprised when players feel like they are being processed instead of entertained. Even worse, this resentment is baked into the legal documents. If you look at the end-user license agreements we all click accept on, you can already see the blueprint for the funeral. Most clearly, Ubisoft's handling of The Crew became the cleanest symbol of that. Back in December 2023, Ubisoft announced that The Crew would be delisted and would remain playable only until March 31, 2024. After this, the servers would be shut down, and the game would no longer be accessible on any platform. Importantly, that wording matters because it was not a partial shutdown. Simply put, it was a death sentence. Later on, backlash intensified around reports that licenses were being revoked after the shutdown. The broader fight escalated again in March 2026 when French consumer group UFC Quatchoiser sued Ubisoft over the game's shutdown and ownership language. Whenever a company tells you that subscription is the future and gamers need to get comfortable not owning their games, it is telling you, in polished executive language, that it wants the certainty of your money without the burden of a lasting product. From here, we get to why this happened, and this is where every padded, corporate-friendly video usually starts tap dancing in circles. Actually, the reason this movement got teeth is not mysterious. Nobody serious is demanding infinite support for every obscure indie game until the sun burns out. Predictably, that is the industry's favorite dodge. Beneath the dodge, the real history is much uglier. Over roughly 15 years, publishers trained players to accept a rigid definition of ownership. One version sounded like this: buy this game, but understand it needs an internet connection to reach the title screen. Another version sounded like this: buy this game, but understand that core features depend on our approval. Yet another version sounded like this: buy this game, but understand that if strategy changes, your purchase might quietly become a memory with a launcher icon. Eventually, once that pattern repeated enough times, players stopped hearing buy now as a promise and started hearing it as a warning label. Predictably enough, the industry response to the hearing was exactly as slippery as you would expect. Trade groups began answering a weaker argument than the one being made. First, they started talking about how server maintenance is expensive. Sure, that is true, but irrelevant. Then, they started talking about how private servers are risky and liability is complicated. Most explicitly, Video Games Europe argued that mandatory end-of-life measures could curtail developer choice. They argued that private servers are not always a viable option because of legal safety and data protection concerns. Translated into human language, that sounds like this: we still want all the control even after the sale, and we would like you to call that responsibility. Fundamentally, these are not just practical issues they want to solve. Functionally, they are riot shields. Repeatedly, they use safety and intellectual property to protect the instinct of total control. Funny enough, consumer freedom somehow becomes unsafe the second the company loses the monopoly on the machine. In that way, the Crew became a symbol because it turned a theoretical fear into a brick thrown through a corporate window. Suddenly, one dead game explained the whole scam faster than 10 years of panel discussions ever could. Sure, you can argue about digital preservation for hours and watch people's eyes glaze over. Otherwise, you can show somebody a product they paid for that is now a literal paperweight. Immediately, that hits harder. As a result, that sticks. Worse still, the Crew is only the cleanest corpse on the floor. That is why this fight matters even if you never touched a racing game in your life. Across the market, look at how many modern hits are built around permanent online dependence, account systems, live service structures, and publisher-controlled backends. For example, Helldivers 2 exists inside a framework where the publisher still holds the master switch. Meanwhile, Destiny 2 has already trained its audience to accept vaulted content, removed campaigns, and a world that can be rearranged above their heads. Elsewhere, GTA Online is a giant rented city, wearing the costume of ownership. So ask the ugly question now, before the next strategic pivot memo arrives. If this initiative fails, what exactly stops some future boardroom decision from erasing your 500-hour save, your purchased cosmetics, your event history, and every memory attached to a game people currently think is too big to die? That is the part casual viewers need to understand. At its core, this is not about one old Ubisoft scandal. Ultimately, this is about whether any game, built like a controlled service, can one day become a locked door, with your money trapped behind it. Crucially, the core demand of the Stop Destroying Videogames initiative was never run every server for eternity. Officially, the initiative calls for publishers that sell or license games in the EU to leave those games in a functional state when support ends. Specifically, this is to stop publishers from remotely disabling them. Compared with the industry spin, that is a narrower and much more reasonable demand than the industry likes to imply. Ideally, patch in an offline mode where possible. At minimum, leave a functional state behind. Better yet, stop selling the car and then taking the keys when the dealership gets bored. So, what happens next? First, the legal machine in Brussels starts grinding. Inevitably, that means examinations, industry lobbying, and 1,000 ways of turning a plain moral complaint into a swamp of technical exceptions. Importantly, this is not a guaranteed victory. Anyone selling you total certainty on a thumbnail is lying. At bottom, this is a collision between public anger and the slow, bloodless method of institutions. Second, the damage to trust is already permanent. After all, 1 million+ verified signatures is not just a milestone. In effect, it is a flare gun. From that signal, every platform and every studio executive can see that a massive chunk of the audience is done with the fake language of player first. Going forward, every live service launch now comes with a trust tax. Consequently, you need more marketing, more spin, and more fake warmth because you poisoned the well. Smarter companies will start building end-of-life plans into their code from day one. At least those companies will see that the public mood has shifted. Dumber companies, the ones led by the spreadsheet men, will keep pushing the same license-only model. They will act stunned when their next big launch fails because the audience is tired of buying funerals. Therefore, if your business model requires a continental bureaucracy to remind you that sold products should not turn into vapor, then your business model is trash, and your leadership deserves the roasting it is currently getting. Somehow, the industry got too greedy, too smug, and too addicted to control. In the end, it accidentally built its own opposition by being so consistently anti-consumer that even politicians noticed. First they sold you the game, then they tried to sell you the funeral, and now they are offended that you noticed the coffin was empty. Now the spell is broken. Suddenly, the player-first experience sounds like a waiter smiling while he steals the cutlery. Frankly, it is about time.